Okay. I think we may be live. Good. All right. Hi, my name's Dave. I'm a guitarist, teacher. This is my first, not only my first YouTube video, my first live video. So, how about that? I don't have a big introduction planned or anything like that. I'm gonna trip over my words. I'm gonna stammer and stutter. I'll try not to. But at any rate, I teach. I transcribe. All this stuff. So I've been playing a while, and many students. So the reason I'm here, I wanted to introduce you guys to just a little packet that I put together called. Oh, where is it? See, we're learning the software and everything. This is going to be fun. All right. Harmony and Theory Quick Start Guide. All right. Is there anything better if you're, say, working with guitar? If you're really a musician, but guitar players in particular, there's not a whole lot better that you could study to really connect all the dots for yourself in your playing, in your understanding of music, in your improvising, in your I'm losing my train of thought already. This is good. All right. We had to get all this out of the way. So anyway, this packet is designed to take you through knowing basically nothing, right? Well, maybe you can play a little bit, you know your way around a guitar. You can do some stuff with that, play a few songs, but you're not really connecting any of the dots as far as, the theory of it all. Maybe you've heard some theory before and it's not quite clear how that applies to guitar playing. You've got these pie in the sky theoretical concepts that you intellectually know, but have no idea how to really make that work on the fretboard. And so that's what we're looking to fix here. And so in a very succinct type of format here, I tried to take the most basic ideas and we start building on each other. So, by the end of this, you go from knowing like what a half step and a whole step is. We're going to talk about that today because today's all about intervals. That's what I want to get through today. I'll explain what that is in a second. But you go from knowing what a half step and a whole step is, right? Basic stuff, all the way through harmonizing a major scale up to its diatonic seventh chords. That's a mouthful. If that sounds Greek to you, then stick with me. You can get this packet, by the way, if you go to morefromdave.com. Can I make it blink over here? That might be fun. No, God, don't even try. All right. I'm not going to touch it. It's More from Dave, up on this side of the screen. Right? Go there. My name's Dave. I'll give you more stuff. I'll give you all the stuff we're doing here, plus some supplemental material. And so the idea behind this was, yes, we have all this simple stuff, simple concepts that build upon each other in the Harmony and Theory Quick Start that you get from morefromdave.com. Those are all simple ideas. Hopefully you can take this and flip through it. It's just a few pages. There's big pictures and stuff. There's not a whole lot of stuff to read. Guitar players don't typically need to read a treatise on music theory. That's not something we're usually down for. But let me just check the chat over here. I knew it. Nobody's here. I'm talking to myself. That's fine. Because I need to work out all these kinks on my own anyway. We're learning software and we're juggling all kinds of windows and stuff, and you see this thing blinking. Anyway, we have the very simple topics covered in the Harmony and Theory Quick Start Guide. I want to take those ideas here and hash them out and make them, take them from being small, concise ideas to be something that you can practice, that you can, put your mind to and start to develop on the fretboard so they become really clear, really ingrained. So without further ado, I've got notes. Today we're talking about intervals, right? What are intervals? So in music, you can measure the distances between two notes, right? And that's all an interval is. Just as an interval in day-to-day life is going to be, the distance between me and the printer back here or something. It's, 6 feet, something like that. That's an interval of 6 feet. Well, likewise, I can take two notes and I can measure the distances between them. And so the smallest 2 units of measure that I have, if I refer back to the packet here, let's see, smallest 2 units of measure that I have in Western music are half steps and whole steps. Most of you are likely familiar with these. So the distance of a half step on the guitar neck is 1 fret. From there to there. I just went from the 5th fret to the 6th fret on the E string. That's a half step. I could go the other way. That's still the same distance, even though the direction of them changed. Open string to the 1st fret, whatever. Everybody knows that, right? Something you might consider is how those intervals, or how a half step in particular, presents itself between 2 adjacent strings. So sometimes I may want to play a half step, maybe not on 1 string, but between 2 strings, and so to do that, I can have a fingering like this. And I think I have, no, that's the whole step sheet. Here's the half step sheet, I think. There we go. We can see the fingering over here for a half step. It looks like this. I'm on the 9th fret on the E string. I can move up to the 5th fret, the D note, on the A string, and that is my half step fingering between 2 adjacent strings. This is important. So I can do that between these sets of strings and get our kind of Twilight Zone sort of vibe on. Between the E string and the A string, the A string and the D string, and the D string and the G string in standard tuning, that fingering remains the same. When I get to the B string, when I get to the B string and the G string and the B string, I should say, we subtract 1 fret from our fingering, right? So where I did have, say, this 5 fret pattern, this 5 fret fingering, I now have a 4 fret fingering between these, 6th fret and the 9th fret on the G string and the B string. Return to that previous fingering, the stretchier one, the 5 fret pattern, when you get between the E string and the B string. So what do we have? We end up with these fingerings for a half step that occur between 2 adjacent strings that allow us to move around a little more efficiently on the guitar neck, right? So chromatic scale, for example, we're going to make our first scale. A scale built entirely of half step intervals. You could play that a lot of different ways. You could start on some note over here and just start playing consecutive frets on 1 string. That's not very efficient, right? What you could do instead, if you knew how these intervals, present themselves between 2 strings, is you could play 4 notes on a string. I just started on the 5th fret, the A note. Put all my fingers down on the consecutive frets, and then I moved over here because I know what that looks like between 2 strings, and I can try that again. So there it is. And there it is again between 2 strings, and this is all written down over here so you can see it. All right, so right over here. Oh God, there it is. All my windows are crashing together here. So anyway, great technical exercise, right? I haven't played much today, so I'm warming up yet. There we go. You could play that ascending, descending. Good way to get to know your half steps. It's good stuff. You could do the same thing with the next smallest interval. That would be a whole step. Where's my window? Where's my stuff? I don't even know. There we go. All right. Whole steps. You add two halves together and you get a whole, and so on the guitar that equals 2 frets, right? So if I, for example, went from the 5th fret on the E string over here, my A note, and I went up to the 7th fret, that's 2 frets. It's a whole step, right? Just like before. I'll take it through the same process. So I will figure out how these 2 notes occur between 2 adjacent strings. That might be something like that, right? It's the same as our half step interval, but 1 fret smaller, right? Because we, added a half step to it. So there we go. We get to know what the fingering looks like between 2 adjacent strings. That's maybe from the 8th fret, the C note on the E string, over to the D note over here on the A. Whole step. Same thing as before. The first 3 sets of strings have the same fingering. And then 1 fret smaller between the G string and the B string. Back to that previous fingering for the B string and the E string. So kind of cool. And just like before, you can build a scale using, there's my computer yelling at me. So just like before, I can use exclusively whole steps to build a scale. And to do this, again, you could do this on one string, but now we know how these things occur between strings. And we get what we call the whole tone scale, right? Built entirely of whole steps. Kind of creepy. Kind of cool though too. Again, good technical workout. And I'm going to send all this stuff along to anybody who gets that packet at the at morefromdave.com. This thing, right? Where am I pointing? I don't know. Wherever it is, you see it. All right. Go to morefromdave.com. You're going to see all the supplemental material sent along to you. Okay, so what's next? I need to build. I've got whole steps. I've got half steps. That all makes sense, right? I'm going to build a major scale. What is a major scale? That's just that do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do type thing that you've heard your entire life, and it's everything in music. Everything else, beyond this point, everything's going to relate to the major scale in one way or another. Anything you do. So important things to get to know. And to do this, we're going to start on a tonic note. That is the starting place, the start of a major scale, or we could say the start of a key, right? Which is kind of one and the same. So our tonic note in this case is going to be C. And from the C note, to get to the second note of the scale, we will play a whole step. So that's C to D. Oop, with the volume up. There we go. Cool. I'm going to do all this on one string for now. All right. So C to D. From the D note, there's another whole step to get to the third note of the scale. That would be D to E, going up to the 7th fret there. Then half step from E to F. So you can see the pattern here. It's whole, half. Pretty good. So a couple more whole steps. From the F note to the G note, that's a whole step. Another whole step from G to A, and then whole step from A to B. Close it out with a half step from B to C. Okay, so this is something to commit to memory, this pattern of intervals. This is the major scale, right? Whole, half, whole, half. That's 2 wholes and a half, 3 wholes and a half. Get to know it. That's your major scale. And now, if you want to get creative, now I know we can all look up scale diagrams and stuff like that. That's good. You can do that. You know, getting to know how to play these things in a position, for example. That's a good idea. I would encourage you to start to find this stuff based on what we just talked about with half steps and whole steps, especially with them occurring on different strings. So, for example, I know that, all right, the first note, my tonic, the first interval to get this thing going is a whole step, right? So from C to D, that's a whole step. Big deal. All right, I just played that on one string. Good. Let's see. So from D to E is also a whole step. So I can play that on one string. I'm sorry, I'm getting distracted here. All right. So what was I saying? I gotta get this thing out of here. Nobody can see what I'm doing, by the way. So I realize this. This is just my own frustration here. So anyway, C to D, that was a whole step. I played that on one string. I could also play, there's D to E, that was on one string again. I don't have to do it that way though. Let's say I don't want to move my hand. So what I might do instead is move from my D to my E, the way I know a whole step moves between 2 strings. So I'm playing the 5th fret over here on the A string and moving to the D string. Over here I've got my 2nd fret. That's an E note. So I've got something like this, right? 3 notes, all in one position. I don't have to move my hand to get this stuff. So, whole step. I know there's a half step that comes next. I'll do that on the same string. Then a whole step, same string again. And then, between 2 strings, I've got another whole step. That's the G note going to the A on the 2nd fret of the G. So, again, I'm keeping this nice compact little fingering here that's working well for playing. I just added another whole step to the top of that. So. And then half step at the end. Any number of ways you could arrange this stuff. You could play whole, half. Can't talk and play at the same time. Here's whole step, half step, I just played 2 notes on the A string, or sorry, 3 notes on the A string. Moved over here to the F note on the D string at the 3rd fret. Lots of ways you could do that. So, well, we're really not in lots of ways. I just dealt with like 3 of them, so that usually covers your bases. Anyway, you can look at the made-for-you scale diagrams and stuff like that. That's interesting, but I would also encourage you to memorize the formula, whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half, and then try to make this stuff on your own. Try to experiment and give yourself the time to kind of explore that. So, moving on. More intervals, right? We just built a major scale. And now I can get larger intervals based on each note's position in that major scale relative to the tonic. Remember, the tonic was the note that we started on to build this whole structure, to build this major scale. And now each note gets its own place here. And so when we talk about intervals in major scale land, each interval is going to get a number based on its position and a quality. So we'll talk about that in a second. But let's see. So we've got the, let's just say, okay, so from the first note to the second note of the scale. Previously, we talked about that as being a whole step. That is still true. But now, in major scale land, we can say, okay, the distance between the first note and the second note of the scale, the tonic and the second note of the scale, is going to be the interval of a second. So we're calling that a second. Same thing with the third, right? So the distance between the first note of the scale and the third note of the scale is now going to be known as a third. So if I played C going up to E, for example, that's the interval of a third. Or a fourth. First note going to the 4th degree of the scale, or the 5th, or the 6th, or the 7th, or finally the, what we could call the 8th, but we refer to as the octave, right? Think about that word, right? What else has a prefix oct, right? Octagon, octopus, octave. There we are. So now we've got all these things numbered. That's swell. They also all have qualities, right? So the quality is either major or perfect when we're talking about notes strictly from the major scale. So you are either a major interval, as in the 2nd, the 3rd, the 6th, or the 7th. Those are all our major intervals. Or you're a perfect interval, and so there's one that's not listed here. That would be unison. So that's as if I had 2 voices that were, playing the same note in the same register. So if I had, what's an example of unison? So if I had, say, a C note here, oops, put the volume up. If I had a C note here and one here, those are the same notes. This is unison, right? And that's a perfect interval. We classify that as perfect. Your 4th and your 5th intervals, those are both perfect, and then your octave is also perfect. Okay. So major intervals, 2, 3, 6, 7, and then perfect intervals, unison, 4th, 5th, octave. Good. Okay. So, incidentally, before I move on, I would get to know the sound of all of these, and here's where, we get to know how to practice this stuff a little. So, I would play these things in one of 2 ways, preferably both ways, but I would play, let's say I want to hear the sound of a major second, for example, so I would play it. I might play it as what we call a melodic interval, that is both notes sounding one after the other, so as in a melody. Or I would play that as a harmonic interval, that is both notes sounding together, right? So I have both notes happening at the same time here, and that's a little tense. Or a third, right? So that was the second. I want to know what a third sounds like. Or a 6th, or a 7th, or an octave, or a 5th, or whatever. So, getting to know these things, and I can write some of that down, I think. I should make myself a note. I'm going to do that. So, major scale interval. Interval practice. for ear training. Ear training is the ability to identify things by ear as they go by. That doesn't necessarily require perfect pitch or anything like that. You don't need to be able to drop your keys on the table and say, oh, that's a C sharp. No, we're listening to the distances between notes, the intervals, right? And we can hear, like if I have a reference note, okay, if I hear this, then I can tell that, okay, that's a fourth interval because I know my intervals. I can hear that. And you can start to identify things that are happening by ear, which is pretty valuable for, you know, an aural skill like music. Let's see, moving on. Okay, so I can alter any of these intervals. So let's talk about major intervals. What's the natural kind of counterpart to major stuff, right? When you think about that, what's the opposite in music? Minor. We can turn a major interval into a minor interval. Let's take our third, for example. There's our major third, right? I can turn a major interval into a minor interval by subtracting 1/2 step. I can lower it by 1/2 step. So instead of playing C to E here, my major third becomes minor by lowering this to E flat. And we can kind of hear that, right? We can hear that, okay, that sounds major, it sounds happy, it sounds triumphant, whatever descriptor we're going to use there. As opposed to the minor, if I lower that 1/2 step. There we go. So, sounds moody, sounds melancholy, right? So, I can have, let's say, a minor second. We knew that previously as a 1/2 step, and I know how to play those two together. Something like that. There's my second, my minor second. C to D, moving to C to D flat for the minor second. It could be a 6th. Pretty good. It could be a 7th. So, B moving to B flat. All good things. So, major intervals become minor by subtracting a 1/2 step. Likewise, our perfect intervals can also become altered. At least we have a different word for it. It's called diminished when I lower it a 1/2 step. So if I had a 5th, for example, that's a perfect interval according to this. So I've got a 5th, C to G, let's say. I want to make that a diminished 5th. I'm going to lower that by a 1/2 step. So G becomes G flat. Pretty cool. That's your George Lynch sound. Likewise, well, not likewise. No, I have another version of my perfect interval, right? I can lower it a 1/2 step, it becomes diminished. If I raise a perfect interval a 1/2 step, it becomes augmented. So let's say I take my 4th, for example, C to F, and I raise that from C to F sharp. That's a perfect, or I'm sorry, a augmented 4th. Right? So, what do we have? We've got whole steps, 1/2 steps. We know how they look on the guitar neck. We can play them between two adjacent strings. We've built scales built exclusively of those two intervals. So the chromatic scale and the whole tone scale, which are cool things to practice. They have some musical use too, but depending on the type of music you're playing, you may see that less often. Excuse me. We also played a major scale. We found the interval structure that creates a major scale. We started on a tonic note. That was the C in our case. We built out this major scale, and from there we found larger intervals, so seconds, thirds, fourths, fifths, so on and so forth. We found out they have a number vis-a-vis the tonic note, right? That is relative to the tonic note. And then we also found out they have qualities, either major or minor. We can, we can then alter our major or minor, or I'm sorry, let me back up. The qualities are either major or perfect. Coming from the major scale, if we stay within the confines of that. From there, we can alter our major intervals to be minor by lowering a 1/2 step, and we can alter our perfect intervals by either lowering it a 1/2 step to make it diminished or adding a 1/2 step to make it augmented. So I feel like I'm going kind of fast through this stuff, but this is all going to be there in print for you at morefromdave.com. And what else can I say? Well, that kind of does it for today. That kind of exhausts all the material that I wanted to get through. I'm going to be back tomorrow. 10 o'clock. How about that? I started late today trying to work out bugs and stuff with the software and all of this. But hopefully some of this was useful. So go to morefromdave.com, sign up for that. You're going to get this and you know, the Harmony and Theory quick start, plus some other fun stuff to supplement this so you can practice it and really start to apply it to what you're doing on guitar. So until then, until tomorrow, 10 a.m., I'm committing to it because it's now out there in the world. Until then, be good. We'll see you soon.